All right, welcome, and thank you for joining us today for Metrotech's Defogging the Cloud webinar. My name is Allison McLaughlin. I'm the Marketing Director at Metrotech and your host for today's webinar. Before we get started, I wanted to let you know that we'll have a question and answer session at the end of the webinar, so if you have questions at any point, feel free to type the questions into the panel on the right side of your screen, and we'll take as many as time allots at the end of the webinar. You can also keep the conversation going on Twitter. We have a hashtag for you to use. You can see it on the slide. It's hashtag #DefogTheCloud. Okay, so we'll be sending a recording of the webinar to all attendees. If you'd like to watch it again or share it with someone else, you'll be able to do that. And I'd like to begin by introducing today's presenters. So let's start with Alex Leslie, a publisher at billingviews.com. Alex was founder and CEO of the Global Billing Association. He's actively provided a focus on the changing business models facing the communications sector, delivering thought leadership, insight, and direction. He's a sought-after speaker and chairman at leading industry conferences and is widely published in communication magazines around the world. So welcome, Alex. We're glad to have you with us.
Thank you.
Also, Jason Mondonero is joining us today. He's a global thought leader for cloud billing and micropayment technologies and our Metrotech Director of Product Management. Over the past 15 years, Jason has co-authored patents on micropayments and high-volume transactional aggregation. He jointly designed and acted as lead developer for the EO Transit Payment System, which was awarded the 2009 Best Transportation Application Sesame Award by Carts and Identification, and was instrumental to the American Public Transportation Association's 2009 Innovation Award to the Utah Transit Authority. So welcome, Jason.
Hello.
Both Jason and Alex will be educating and enlightening us today on the topic of cloud billing and pricing. So why don't we go ahead and get started. So Alex, BillingViews has been having a lot of discussions about billing and the cloud. So why don't you tell us a little bit about those?
Thank you very much, Alison. And just to say, it's a pleasure to be here on what is a lovely sunny afternoon in Edinburgh in Scotland, which is a very rare thing. You're absolutely right. This whole issue of cloud billing is a very hot topic. It's got a lot of hype, and at BillingViews we have tried over the last few weeks and months to begin to define what each of the terms mean that becomes involved. There are many different types of cloud, I guess. One of them is, of course, billing for cloud services, which is not really our topic today. But there are a whole host of terms which keep cropping up, and some of them are actually very old terms. So you get things like hosted billing, cloud-based billing, application service provider, and a whole heap of others. But I just wanted to focus on three of them today, just to begin to kind of define exactly what we're looking at when we're looking at the term cloud-based. And certainly hosted, I think, certainly it is in the cloud, but the difference between hosted billing and software as a service, for example, is that it's actually customizable for every customer. And so from that point of view, you're really just, the provider is giving a billing service which could equally be on the biller's own premises. But it tends to feature longer contracts. And in fact, the best definition I think that we found was from, we went behind the scenes into Metrotech's own technical department, and they came back with a view that said enterprise software configured, it's actually enterprise software configured for each individual customer. So from that point of view, it's very different. Could I have the next one, please, Jason? Software as a service, this, I guess, is really where we're going with software as a service or billing as a service in terms of this, to me, is the real term for cloud-based billing. Customers do not have the freedom to customize it. The upgrades depend on the provider, not the customer. And its key feature really is multi-tenancy. So it is really one of those things where you have to decide the level of complexity versus the business model that you want to put out into the market. And Jason, I know, is going to be talking a little bit about this in a while. Could I have the next one? And managed services are also coming into play along with application service providers and things. And in fact, I did a bunch of work on managed services and some of the telecoms operators' views about it. And really, managed services, to me, the key differentiator is it's actually a partnership. It's not simply outsourcing. It has to be based on real trust between the vendor and the provider or the customer. Because at the end of the day, you can sign as many contracts as you like, but unless you actually trust the guys who are essentially part of your own team, then it's going to go wrong. And in fact, one of the interviews I did as part of that piece of work was with a very large North American carrier, telecoms carrier, and his view was that managed services are very good. They need as much oversight as any other kind of relationship with a vendor. So yes, it's trust, but it is also defined by governance and rules. And his key point, I think, was that every single project that came across his desk, and he was in charge of IT for the whole of the organization, was that they would sit down with their vendor, with their managed services vendor, and figure out exactly how they were going to approach it, whether the software or the project was going to be hosted within the vendor's premises in their data centers or in the carrier's data centers, and each individual project was looked at completely differently. And there's a link in that slide to one of the articles which we used to begin to describe the various flavors of cloud billing. So I guess in conclusion of my little introduction here, I suppose the definitions are important up to a point. I think it's quite important that customers have a clear idea of what they're asking for and what they actually need. But the choice of which cloud solution, if cloud is the right way to go, is really about the business models and the complexity with which you want to not necessarily only start with, but in terms of maturing the business model in your offering. And I think Jason is going to take over from me here and just talk a little bit about that beyond the labels, I believe is his tagline. So Jason, over to you.
Great, thanks a lot, Alex. So yes, one of the things that we need to start digging into in this day and time now with the cloud really taking off is going a little bit beyond the labels. So not all hosting solutions are the same, as neither are any SaaS solutions. You really need to dig into a little bit the deeper layer there beyond the label in terms of where will your billing system be physically, who's going to operate all the different components, balancing the exclusivity of control versus shared development, and really what does your billing system need to do today and into the future as your business grows. So let's start with a little bit about trade-offs of location. So I think a lot of people can't avoid the news in terms of things like Superstorm Sandy, among many other disasters. That brings home the fact that all IT systems are in fact rooted in some physical server sitting in some building somewhere, and that really matters. And the question is how you can leverage providers and architectures to protect yourself, and in best case scenario be in literally two places at once at the very least. And what we're kind of seeing is that there are really only three places where you can run your IT systems these days. You can either run them in your own building or facility, you can rent space in someone else's facility, or you can run it essentially in the public cloud where everything's all virtualized in someone else's set of facilities. It's very rare that your own facilities are as redundant as you'd like, unless you're a very, very large-scale business. However, that does make them very inexpensive. You minimize redundancy, you buy things on a CapEx basis or amortize them in a lease. So it's very low operating expense. The resilience is up to your own choice. But of course, your incremental CapEx is very high if you need to expand to a new building. Same thing with colo facilities. You get some additional resilience. They're specially designed facilities. Your elasticity is still low. You only have so much cage space, so many servers that you may have physically installed. Again, OpEx may be low, incremental CapEx is medium because you're buying equipment. And then the public clouds really kind of change things on the head. So resilience and elasticity are very high and very inexpensive. you have essentially no CapEx beyond perhaps maybe licensing of software in an infrastructure as a service model, and your OpEx is medium. Certainly it's a little bit more expensive to run things in the cloud than if you were to buy your own virtualization hardware, but you get all the other benefits along with that. So it's very important for you to understand kind of what's going on behind the scenes here and what the trade-offs you're making. So if your business is relatively steady, then maybe elasticity isn't important to you. If you're running a critical business service, then resilience probably matters a lot. And the reason why I say really these three things is that if you have a hosting provider or a SaaS provider or whoever is providing your solution, they themselves are probably choosing one of these three options. And what does that mean? So what does it mean if you have a SaaS provider, but their SaaS solution is basically run in a private on-premise location based in California? So maybe that's not really that resilient after all if they have one facility in a fault zone. Versus if you have a hosting provider that's a very large-scale provider with a global reach and multiple data centers. So even though it maybe seem kind of an old-school hosting solution, because of their size and scope of the business, it may be very resilient and very well architected. So there's a lot of trade-offs there that you need to consider. And what ties into that is also who's in control. So it's very easy nowadays to really segment all the different parts of your technology and architectural stack and source them to a variety of different people. So the idea that you have hosting or managed services or on-premise really doesn't capture the complexity of the combinations that exist today. So you have infrastructure as a service or platform as a service or traditional cages. Where are the physical servers going to be run? Who operates those? Who installs the operating system, does security patches, and picks the version of the database or the database technology? Who does that? And then finally, the application and actually operating, working with the application. So who's in control of each as far as how many vendors are you contracting with, and where does each layer actually run in the previous case? So a lot of times you need to look at this and look at your providers in terms of who's in control and how much control are you willing to forego. So what does managed services mean when someone else is in charge of the security patches versus the traditional sense of full outsourcing? The last thing that kind of will tie in here real quickly is the balance of custom and upgrades, as Alex alluded to. So this is kind of some extreme examples here, but in the traditional case of outsourcing or on-premise software, or even in hosted, you could always pretty much get whatever feature you want to, as long as you're willing to fund the statement of work and have your vendor build it, or maybe even have an integrator build it for you. And on the opposite extreme with multi-tenant SaaS applications, there's kind of a sense that the benefit of this is that the whole community is contributing to features and upgrades all happen automatically, and you get all this stuff for free. But at the same time, you have little control in terms of driving that roadmap and that process. So, perhaps the engineering organization only wants to work on interesting features or features that the majority of the market cares about, that, and you may be an outlier. So you may have some issues there in terms of getting things done. So the key thing is to figure out where in the spectrum things can exist. And as we blend these deployment models and these physical models, you can really kind of start to mix these up. And it's not just SaaS that can deliver constant upgrades because it's multi-tenant architecture for that. You can enforce that discipline onto traditional enterprise software in a hosted space or managed services space if you have the discipline as a software organization to deliver that. But you have to find a vendor that has a commitment to doing that and provides SLAs and other contractual agreements to support that model. And the last thing is, what is billing to you? So just how important, how strategic is your billing system to your business model? So if you think about a lot of businesses, maybe the billing is not that important. It's just simply price times quantity. and it's really around the marketing, the brand, and other aspects of your business that are important and strategic for you. And your business model is really just not going to be that complicated, or it's all physical goods, and they literally will have a price, and you will charge for them. On the other side of the spectrum, Metrotech is run across the whole range with its customer base. Is that we have some customers, it's quite common, especially in larger scale businesses or businesses that come from a deregulated base, where you have very complex algorithms. You have millions and millions of dollars at stake with very large scale contracts on a monthly basis. So you have the ability and the cost justification for having complex models that, for example, have multiple revenue shares, have multiple contractual commitments, currency conversion, trade-offs, arbitration, and things of that nature. So you can get quite complex business models, and you may need a billing system to support that. So this is something that I think is almost more important in that it drives all the other decisions. Is who are you going to select, and what type of system do you need to have, and then what are your options of getting that sourced appropriately. And I think this is one of the things that, Alex, I know is another area of topic on your website, where people are debating the benefits and pros and cons between simple pricing models and complex pricing models.
Well, exactly, and I think we've seen in the market over a period of time that, particularly in telecoms, which is, I have to admit, where I've been for the last 20 years, so that's where most of my experience is that you go in kind of cycles where tariffs or pricing plans tend to get more and more complex, more and more sophisticated, and then somebody comes along and says, actually the differentiator is really simple. And then you get a sort of a cycle that occurs, so it goes back to simple for a while, and then you get into a kind of price war, and then people go, oop, no, we need to get more sophisticated again. And I think that there is definitely a cycle here. And the other thing I would say, perhaps, is that if you believe right now that you can offer something in a very simple billing model, it's obviously worth looking a couple of years down the line and thinking, well, am I going to need to become or make my offering more sophisticated somewhere down the line? And I know I would say this, but having looked at a few cloud offerings from various vendors who came from telecoms and came from other areas of the industry, I would say that the history and the experience of telecoms software vendors, billing vendors, is really putting them in pretty good stead, because they're used to addressing complex rating and complex charging.
Yes, I agree. I've seen exactly the thing in my career in billing as well. Like you said, it's that trade-off between negotiating more complex deals and then someone coming along saying it's too expensive to manage this, let's go back to simple, and then vice versa. It seems to come every couple of years in various ways. So let's dig into this a little bit more then. The current, one of the hot topics, I think, especially in cloud, is everyone saw cloud as a chance to go back, to the case of simple. And the real question is can a single number do it all? As a service provider, you have to worry about covering your costs, maintaining margins, and from a customer perspective, they want to feel that they're being treated fairly and they're getting good value. But one of the things I think that we've seen is that you have to be aware of simple answers. Often they just move the challenges to a different part of the business, and you wind up having to manage things, behind the scenes. So let's talk a little bit more about the, value curve in the third dimension. So some people may be familiar with Blue Ocean's value curve strategy. So say, for example, you're a vendor and you've built a new software solution that maximizes several items on your value curve, but you want to go simple. So you've built a product, it has a range of features and capabilities, and you go to the market with a flat subscription price. So what does that actually do to your actual target market and the customers that you might be able to get? So we have here a simple chart that organizes the spectrum of potential customers by the amount they're willing to pay versus the functionality that they want to use in your product. Now on the left-hand side, I have what I would call the cheapskates, the people that want all the functionality and don't want to pay for it, and maybe that audience is probably something that you'll never satisfy. They're always there. But at the same time, on the right-hand side of this screen, you have to be a little bit cautious. So the big, problem customers are what I would call the gobblers. If you think about when the iPhone came out and you had unlimited data, for example, and the networks were brought to their knees by a very small number of customers that consumed almost all the network bandwidth because it was unlimited and there was no consequences to utilizing it at that rate, that became a big problem for all customers and for AT&T at the time, trying to invest in upgrading their network because a very small number of customers were utilizing so much of it and damaging the experience for everyone else. The other people to be worried about is the bottom right-hand side, the customers that don't need all the functionality that you are providing, but because there's not that many choices in the marketplace, they're willing to pay for it to get it now. But you have to be careful because they're pretty much just waiting for something better to come along. So if someone else comes in with a more focused or lower feature product at a lower price, you can easily lose those customers. And then you have two lost and potential opportunity segments here. So people that will use less functionality and are willing to pay less, and people who are happy to pay more for the functionality that they're using. Both those are opportunities that you are missing out in the marketplace for increasing your revenue. So there's a way that some people try to approach this, and that's what I would call the subscription cliff. And what does that really mean? So it means that you may introduce additional subscription price points. And the problem with that is that as the customer's behavior changes and they want to maybe address or outgrow a certain price point, they have to indicate new decisions. And that raises a potential increase for churn. So if a customer, especially a B2B customer, had to go through a procurement or some sort of a decision-making process to purchase your service at a certain price point, and then they start to go beyond the functions and capabilities that are encompassed by that price point, they now have to do a new evaluation. They need to decide, are they using enough functionality to bump up to the next tier of subscription? And if they're going to go through that process, they may need to get authorization. They may need to then go through another evaluation, or maybe your service is on the web and your competition's on the web, and they can just do a quick Google to see if someone else is now able to manage that capability. So it really winds up causing a lot of confusion, as well as raising a lot of risks without a little benefit. And you can see from some examples here of people that really start growing the number of price points and subscription options. And if you look at it, it can be very daunting in terms of which one do you pick. What happens if you change your behavior and you now have to move into and out of one? Are you going to wind up suddenly being treated badly based on your current usage? And there's a lot of friction in terms of doing business with the vendor. And that has a lot of problems. So maybe people think that consumption-based pricing is the answer, but really that's flat fees by another name. So you have to be very careful when you go to a simple consumption or usage-based model as well. The place where this is most prevalent today is the cloud, actually. So if you think about infrastructure as a service, that's one of the few places that's really obvious in the market, heavily usage-oriented in its billing models. You pay for compute hours, you pay for gigabytes of storage, you pay for bandwidth in, bandwidth out, edge caching, things like that. However, the problem with that is that that's not a differentiated service. So if you organize your pricing and your billing models around the aspect of what you're delivering that's not differentiated, then it may not be your customers that are driving your business, but your competition. So, for example, here's a chart from RightScale, who regularly publishes an analysis of cloud pricing. And look at the number of price reductions over the past year by different vendors. You can see Amazon, as the market leader, is really pushing down the prices for what's essentially a non-differentiated service and really hurting the competition. And I believe they just announced the other week another 80% reduction in EC2 pricing. So yes, consumption scales automatically with your customers' growth and decline of their business and provides a fair and equal value to them. However, it's not a good way of differentiating yourself from your competition in order to preserve margin or preserve revenues, whereas you can really lose out very quickly by not having differentiation there. So what is this really saying is that you need to go beyond single prices. You need to track more forms of utilization and new measures of value. And you need your customers to be able to pick and choose from that and understand what it is they're doing and how it ties back to that value, so you can provide a more tailored experience from the billing perspective and therefore defend yourself from competitive pressures as well as allow yourself to easily grow your business with your existing customer base, who obviously are the least expensive customers to do more business with than the new ones. So what are the ways that customers and businesses do that traditionally? So a traditional way of doing that is by setting various boundaries and contractual commitments and tiers and terms. So the idea is that you want to set boundaries in your contracts. You want them to be intentionally permeable because you don't want to slow down or introduce artificial decision points with your customers. And you want to establish consequences of crossing. And I'm sure a lot of you have day-to-day experience with this. If you think about everyone who has a mobile phone plan, which I would imagine is 100% of the audience, how many minutes do you pay for on a monthly basis? And does the phone company prevent you from using more than that? The answer is usually no. You just are going to pay an overage fee of some kind, or your SMS message counts. Frequent flyers out there, how close are you to premier status this year? In December, don't you want to know how close you are to getting silver or gold status? And if it's worth it, take a trip to nowhere, which is actually quite common for frequent business travelers. They'll take a quick flight, the last week of December to California and back to bump them over their tier to get gold status. It's worth doing that, but they want to know. They don't want to wind up in January 1st and see that they didn't make it and have to suffer through a whole year of paying for bags, as it were. So customer perception matters. And really there's three ways to drive customer perception. And we'll use another day-to-day example. So there's information. So speed limit is 25 miles an hour. If you say you have 100 minutes of phone calls in your plan, or so many gigabytes of storage. If you just provide this as an informational basis without any consequences or enforcement, people will go over. So I'm sure a lot of people out here profess to be speed limit followers, but probably drive a little bit faster than 25 in a 25-mile-an-hour zone, unless they see a policeman on the side of the road. Flip side of that is hard enforcement. So what's this? This is a there's a lot of traffic cameras and speed cameras being set up around the world, and the problem with that is that, yes, you were breaking the law, and yes, you're getting enforced, but it's a very contentious issue from a public policy perspective because it really drives people nuts. And if you think about it from a contractual perspective, say you had a business account, and all of a sudden when people hit the limit, you cut them off. That would not be a very happy phone call for your salespeople to have with your customer, and would probably drive them to change their mind. So, and actually these pictures are backwards, I just realized. Someone switched them at some point. So the actual thing that you want to do is provide more of an influence point of view. Actually this goes with the right photo, and the right and the middle photos are backwards here. So the thing is that you want to actually influence people. You want to let them know when they're approaching boundaries and give them the chance to change their ways, or to buy more service, or to renegotiate, or take some action that helps them to use your business more in a way that they feel drives value. So what are the common ways that people are doing this? And you can see this starting to happen even in cloud, and it's been around in a lot of other types of business for quite a long time. So things like having peak and off-peak pricing, having promotional periods, allowing people to commit to things in a contract in order to receive a discounted buying rate, for example. Bundling things together, surcharges, SLA credits. All these things have existed in a variety of business models and continue to be important in terms of driving customer behavior and maximizing your margin in your value to your customers. The key, though, is that transparency is critical. No one wants to be slapped upside the head with penalty fees without having been warned. It's going to be a very contentious relationship with your customers if you do things like that. People want the opportunity to get a better rate, and that's an opportunity for you to get them to commit to more volume with you and drive more business. So the answer to doing this, a lot of people will say, is big data. So that's another big buzzword that we see going on in the marketplace. Big data is the answer to everything. We'll give people data, we'll give people information, and everything will work itself out. But there are some limits to that. So let me give you some big data examples that I run into on my own day-to-day basis. Here's an example from a billing system that I have a contract with. It's for my cloud usage. It's telling me that my balance for my unbilled overage is $4,842.27. Great. Is this data or information? What am I supposed to do with this piece of information? Am I going to run out of my balance? Am I on track to run out? What rate am I running out at? When will I need to top up this balance? How do I make decisions about that? Basically, what I have to do with this company is I have to go back and look at all my historical emails, put them into a spreadsheet, and develop my own trending in order to figure out when I need to issue a PO with my IT department to top up my cloud account. It's kind of a tedious amount of effort on my side. Here's an example of a text message I get, which is a little bit better, but still not quite there, right? So here's an example of a text message I got on my wife's phone, who doesn't use a lot of data, and it's basically saying that she's at 65% of her daily plan utilization on the last day of the billing cycle. So what am I supposed to do with this? Is this basically saying that, great, I'm at 65% on my last day, I made it, I stayed on the limit, I'm not going to pay overages? Or is this really telling me that my kids have the phone in the other room and they're downloading all sorts of things off of YouTube and on the internet, and I've chewed up 65% of my usage in a single day, and I'll probably go into overage by this evening? I don't know. So the information here is that you have to give data in a context that the customer actually cares about and wants to actually use and make decisions off of. So we actually call this behavioral billing. Is that operational data must be in a business context that matters to the customer, not just to you as the vendor. And what we do to support that is what we call nowcasting and notifications. It's really a shared language between you and the customer. The customer defines what their commitment contracts are. They define what sort of warning thresholds they have, what rates matter to them, and can pick and choose from a variety of different metrics and have those displayed to them not only through web interfaces and mobile devices, but then it can also set up proactive notifications that they can receive through email or SMS that allows them to know when their business is doing things that they care about so that they can take proactive action with us as the vendor in order to change their plan, change their pricing, renegotiate things, or even within their own internal staff, shut people off, talk to department heads, have them, follow up on things, make sure they're turning off machines, they're not over-consuming, things of that nature. So it's very important in terms of having this two-way street of communications in terms of allowing customers to react and work with you in a way that makes sense for them as individuals, not as a blanket statement. All right. Now, the key thing with this is that there's the ability to turn it up a notch. So another hot topic in the cloud is APIs. So there's a lot of talk about this is now the day and age where APIs are finally coming into their own. With so many systems in the cloud and on the public internet and with web search and modern APIs, we can now interact with things in a highly configurable fashion and a highly tailorable fashion. So the idea here is that if you have things like the nowcasting dashboard, which is providing real-time customer-driven information, and you have things like modern APIs and public APIs in your billing system, can you combine the two together in such a way that can really drive data and behavior-driven product configuration? And I think the answer to that is yes. And this is something that we've been advocating and working with some of our customers on in terms of automating new product development based on customer behavior. So how can you take user behavior, which is now casted to customers in real time, but also cast that internally for a feedback loop combined with your product cost and profitability goals in order to design real-time offers and package changes, which you can then present out to the customer. So you can not only tell a customer, hey, you're about to go over your limit, but you can then specifically design, based on the rate that they're consuming things, a new offer unique to them, which can be promoted to them in real time, saying, you're about to go over, we suggest you upgrade to this plan, click here to accept the contractual change. So that way you have a feedback loop that's specifically tailored to individual customers, and you don't have the traditional lag, which no matter how wonderful a user interface you have, if you have to have staff manually configure billing and pricing models, test them, go through them in a manual process, that may take a couple of days before you get to them, whereas your customer is right then and there has a situation they need to respond to, and that's the moment of impact where if you present them with the right offer, you can upsell them and grow your business. Now, this may sound kind of far-fetched and something that is very science fiction, but the truth is that there are industries where this is day-to-day business. So you think about airline yield management systems. As people are buying and selling tickets through various travel websites, through the different reservation systems, the system is keeping track of how close it is and what pace it is at filling up all the seats in that plane and adjusting the price of those seats accordingly on a very real-time basis to try and drive that. Same thing, Amazon has been experimenting with the spot pricing option for their market. So they have a utilization goal. They have enough reserve capacity to deal with the elasticity needs of their compute customers, but if that is not being utilized enough, they have some reserve capacity, they want to put that on the spot pricing market to try and adjust the pricing in real time to get that consumption utilization up to some minimum level in order to preserve their margins and make a cost justification for their investment. We're starting to see more things with geolocation-driven coupons. You may want to give a bigger discount to a customer who's on the other side of town than one who's standing outside your front door, because the amount of effort required for that person to make that decision to get into your store is going to be different for those two people. And you need to know that and respond accordingly to that. And of course, there's a whole suite of exchange-powered business models, from stock exchanges, buying and selling marketplaces, even car sharing services where different drivers and owners can put their cars up for sale to each other for rentals, like relay rides or something like that. These types of business models are starting to evolve and adapt in the new places, and having a billing system that's capable of supporting that in the future is important as well. So that concludes my slides for now. I want to reserve some time here at the end for a vigorous Q&A. And I don't know if, Alex, you want to start by chiming in with any final comments on the slides we just went through before we open up for the first question. And everyone else, you should type in your questions, and Jen and Allison here will be going through them.
The only addition I'd have perhaps is I think the sophisticated business models are going to appear in unexpected places. I was reading with some surprise actually just a couple of days ago a study, or not a study, a story of a company called Mobile Link in North America, in the States, which provides backup, the interface between backup generators and customers. And so, when it gets really hot or really cold, it's actually of great value to a customer to know that the battery on the generator is low, or something has gone slightly wrong, or it's up for its 6-month service or whatever it is. And the charging model was actually quite sophisticated. It wasn't, as you might expect, just a straight subscription to the service. It was offered as a kind of pay-as-you-consume service. There were recurring fees. There were one-time charges. There were sort of premium services for push notifications if there was something seriously wrong with the generator. And it occurred to me that it was a very good example of finding what is of real value to the customer, but also quite surprised to me that it was actually being offered as quite a sophisticated business model rather than just a straight subscription. And I think we will surprise ourselves over the next months and years in finding more and more of these appear.
Yeah, I would agree. I was actually driving home the other day, and one of the folks that I use, I saw an example. They're considering moving beyond simple subscription as well as, I believe it was Carbonite Backup. Was looking at introducing a new pricing model where instead of just paying for the total gigabytes of backups that you store with them online, actually differentiating between the data that you store on a regular basis versus the number of gigabytes, the number of files that you actually restore in the event that you need to restore from your backup, because that's really the high value component they're finding in the marketplace. It's not just storing things as an online backup, but if I actually had a hardware failure at that moment in time, restoring those files is the most important thing to me in the world, and therefore I'm probably willing to pay quite a bit to restore those files.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that's a good example, and I think we will see more in the remote or connected healthcare markets and probably the automotive markets. I thought it was fascinating that probably some of the greatest innovations at the moment in the sort of what we, from the telecoms point of view, call the M2M, machine-to-machine market, are actually coming from the car industry, which I think is extremely interesting.
Great.
Okay, so we have had some questions that have been asked throughout the webinar. The first one is related to the trade-offs of location slide. That was very early on that Jason was speaking to, and Fritz asks, why is OpEx in the public cloud more expensive?
So actually, if you think about it, if you look at the amortized cost, and the example here that we were using was based on our own experience at Metrotech. So Metrotech, we have hosting, we have stuff here on-premise. We also have a hosted cage at, actually it happens to be an AT&T facility, and we also have a SaaS product that runs on the Azure public cloud. So we run things in all three different types of locations. That's based on our experience that with our CFO, the cost of purchasing or leasing, for example, an ESX host and running a variety of machines and that actually winds up being less over 3 years than the current cost of compute hours on Amazon or Azure. And the reason for that is that baked into the public cloud pricing is a variety of that resiliency and elasticity capabilities that you don't get with a physical server. So if we amortize the cost of our IT staff and the physical hardware, it still winds up being less for us than the public cloud. Although the public cloud, we get better resiliency and better elasticity for essentially built into that price. So right now, I don't think anyone could say that compute hours on the public cloud are cheaper than what you could do by purchasing and operating the hardware yourself, from what I've seen at least.
Okay, great. Thanks, Jason. Follow up also on the on slide 7, which was the balance of custom and upgrades. Mike says, are you saying you cannot customize a multi-tenant solution?
What I'm saying is that if you want to customize a multi-tenant solution, your vendor needs to do it in a way such that it doesn't impact any of the other tenants in the solution. So there is a fair bit of overhead in terms of developing that type of customization. This is something that we've also experienced on our SaaS business. So we've had customers want conflicting changes to functionality, which means that instead of just implementing it flat out, we have to implement it in such a way that allows us to turn it on and off for different tenants or allow us to have configurable policies. So it actually winds up being a little bit more complex to implement than in the traditional enterprise hosted or on-premise scenario. And sometimes customers are surprised at that cost because from their point of view, the whole point of SaaS is that it's supposed to be low cost and everything's supposed to be inexpensive, and upgrades and features are for free. And when you tell them that what they're looking for is unique or one-off, and there's some burden to doing that, they're oftentimes surprised. So it's not that it's impossible, it's just that it oftentimes conflicts with the customer's own perception of the value proposition of a SaaS solution.
Okay, great. All right. So that seems to wrap up the questions that we had. Before we end the webinar, just wanted to see if Alex or Jason had any final thoughts.
Alex, you go first.
Okay. Very good. There was one, it's slightly tangential to this conversation, but interesting to me, so I'll just go ahead and ask it. In your product development slide where you talked about being able to produce or develop products really quickly, are you finding that you are talking to a wider group within your customers than you were before in terms of selling software to them or selling solutions to them, or are you still talking basically to the same people?
So I think the audience is the same, but the sophistication is changing. So, you know, the target audience for a lot of our customers is the sales, marketing, and product development groups. You know, the key driver to a lot of our customers in terms of acquiring a billing system is speed to market and agility. So how can they develop new products and services and bring them to market faster? And oftentimes, because of you know, a home-built system or a legacy system, they don't have that agility to introduce new products and services. Something for which, you know, our data-driven architecture, I think, really helps us with. But even then, there are limitations to that. So people want to do A/B testing and do more sophisticated marketing analysis. And the question is how can you easily create products and services that automatically bifurcate your markets, your customer bases, and select who to appear to in order to drive that in a more automated fashion, so you can do these things even faster than you can today.
Right, okay, thank you.
Okay. All right, well, so that wraps up the webinar for us today. I hope you found the webinar to provide you some insight as you continue to defog the cloud as it relates to billing software and pricing cloud products. So for more information about Metrotech, you can visit us at www.metrotech.com. And if you'd like to speak with someone at Metrotech directly, you can email info@metrotech.com. Thanks to Alex and Jason for your time today, and thanks to all that attended. I hope you found it informative. Be on the lookout for a link with the recorded webinar. That'll come by email, so you can watch it again or share it with others. And thanks, and have a great day.
Thank you.
Thanks.